Welcome back, everybody. It's Wednesday, September 25th, 2024. Born on this date in 1954, former Alabama center, Mississippi State head coach, and NFL player and coach Sylvester Croom of Tuscaloosa. He was the first black head football coach in the SEC. Today, we'll look at pregnancy-related arrests, absentee ballot law, and illegal shrimping. After the break, we'll talk Pulitzer Prizes, Birmingham crime, and more with AL.com columnist John Archibald. My name's Ike Morgan, and we're down in Alabama. A study has found that since the U.S. Supreme Court's reversal of Roe v. Wade in 2022, more women are being charged with pregnancy-related crimes other than abortions, according to a report by the Associated Press. Now, the research was done by an advocacy group, Pregnancy Justice. It showed that at least 210 women nationwide were charged with such crimes over the year after Roe was overturned, and 104 of those happened in Alabama. No state other than Alabama and Oklahoma had more than 10. Across the nation, only one arrest involved an alleged violation of the abortion ban, and the law that was applied was later overturned. Most of the charges were for alleged child abuse, neglect, or endangerment. A federal judge has filed a preliminary injunction to partly stop the enforcement of Alabama's new law regarding those who distribute or collect absentee ballots, reports AL.com's Howard Koplowitz. The law makes it a crime to pay or be paid for providing absentee ballot assistance. Several voting, disability, and civil rights groups filed a lawsuit challenging that law earlier this year. Chief U.S. District Court Judge R. David Proctor, who issued the injunction, had previously narrowed that lawsuit to include only voters who are blind, disabled, or illiterate. Alabama Attorney General Steve Marshall has indicated that he would appeal the decision. In the past week, we've already had people who came from Florida to Alabama and were busted for allegedly taking saw palmetto berries from a national park. Now, we have the crew of an Alabama-based commercial fishing boat busted for allegedly possessing 45,000 pounds of illegally obtained pink shrimp in Florida, reports AL.com's Patrick Darrington. Coast Guard Station Key West said the problem was the boat's permit had expired. The Coast Guard, in a statement, said it had, quote, terminated the vessel's voyage, which sounds ominous, but means the boat's shrimping was over, and it was sent back to Alabama. Hey, we're going to take a really quick break. Come back here and talk Birmingham crime and more with AL.com columnist John Archibald. Y'all stay with us. Well, thanks for staying with us, folks. You know, as a kid, I hated those commercial breaks, but earlier this week, I must have spent half an hour watching YouTube videos of those exact same commercials from when I was a kid. McDLT, Ginsu Knives, all of them. So just know that our ad spots are raising money to hire a band and building nostalgia. So you're welcome for that. For our second segment today, we're going to welcome back to Down in Alabama Pulitzer Prize winning columnist, writer, and host of the Murrow Award-winning podcast, Unjustifiable, author of the book, Shaking the Gates of Hell, A Search for Family and Truth in the Wake of the Civil Rights Revolution, and now, most recently, Pulitzer Prize board member, John Archibald. Good to see you again, John.
Wow. Thank you. Good to see you, too. I want to talk about Mayor McCheese for a second, though. I mean, you're talking about the commercials coming out of break. And it took me, I spent like an hour and a half the other day explaining Mayor McCheese and the Hamburglar to somebody who was younger than me and not from around here. And it does not translate well.
They want to know what kind of LSD were you doing?
Well, we'll save that for a different kind of podcast. But it's a unique moment in history, I guess, that's just hard to explain. It's like the Nikki's West, steam table. I mean, it's hard to explain that to somebody who's never seen it.
Well, people started being raised on TV more and more, and especially by the time you get into the late '70s, early '80s. But it was a glorious time as well.
It was.
Tell us about the Pulitzer board. Now, that sounds to me like something I would have always figured the New York Times and Washington Post completely hoarded. And here we are with a Southern guy on the Pulitzer board.
Yeah,
How'd that come about?
I don't know. I don't know. I mean, it wasn't something I saw it, and they called me and said I was elected to it, and it was crazy because that's not even something that I would dare to think about to have on my bucket list. I mean, it's like this is just insane, and there's national poet laureates and editor of the New Yorker and editor of the Boston Globe and Philadelphia Inquirer, all this stuff. And there's all these people that I've admired in my life. And I'm sitting there looking at this, and it's like one of these things is not like the other, right? And that's me. but it's kind of cool to be able to represent the South, which doesn't often happen, and to represent Alabama, which really rarely happens. I don't know when it's happened, honestly, and to just kind of I'll stake that ground and be the Southern guy, and that's a huge honor for me. I'm happy about it.
There are ASNE awards, Green Eyeshade Awards, APSC awards, and you'll have folks. You'll have a panel who will judge sections and stories and to help give out these awards, and you'll be doing that, right? Something like that for the Pulitzer prizes.
Well, what happens is they select juries for every category, and there's like 17 different categories, everything from breaking news to commentary to plays and music, like and things, that'll be interesting. But they have juries that sit down and debate for several days with a strict set of standards, and then the top three in each category go to the board, and the board, which I've never done before because I just got on it, but I will in October. We'll sit down and go over these things in all the different categories and pick the ones they like the best. So, I don't know exactly how that's going to go down, if there's fighting and fisticuffs and that sort of thing, but I'm told the standards are really high, but it's sort of like being in the coolest book club in the world. So
Yeah,
it'll be a lot of reading.
I can't wait to hear after the fact.
Well, I probably will be sworn to secrecy and would have to kill you and all that were I to say anything. But it's a very tight process. But it's I'm really cool to learn about it myself.
Yeah, and of course the attention came your way, I'm sure, because you've won 2 Pulitzers now. And I want to ask you, I mean, obviously Pulitzer is much more elite than publishing a book, but you had these cool moments in your career. What ranks the highest at this point?
Um, I mean, I've been fortunate to get. I mean, the Pulitzer was great because it opened the door to all the other stuff. I mean, and
Mhm.
people should know that prizes, any prize, and the Pulitzer included, is so arbitrary that if you take it too seriously, you will make yourself crazy and you'll think that you're something that you're not. And if you stop being the person you were in the beginning, then it's all counterproductive, I think. But and if you work to get that stuff, then you do work that's not worthy of that stuff, right? So it has to
Yeah.
just kind of happen by accident. The stars align. There's so much
Hmm.
good stuff that doesn't get the award that to take it too seriously is a big mistake. But the first one opened up the doors. But the second one, I won with my kid and other people. You never dream of winning a Pulitzer Prize with your kid, and that one, Beth Ramsey, and to me that when that happened, it was like I was thinking more about him than I was of me when they got that, and it struck me later that is so much cooler,
Yeah.
than
Yeah.
to be concentrating on yourself in those moments. So I mean, I would have to say that.
Hmm.
That would be it. But I'm not done
Yeah.
yet. I mean, I talked to a guy today. I wrote a play a while back, and talked to a guy today who
Oh,
wants to turn it into an opera. So
wow.
if I can check opera and play opera, which I've never seen, and play, which I rarely go to, I will be. I think that'll be kind of cool.
The writer has to sing at least one part in the opera. That's like a rule up there.
Oh, well, then we're out. Well, or the audience is out.
That is fancy, all from the Alabama boy.
It's ridiculous, and I know it's ridiculous, and I feel pretty lucky and pretty um, glad that I stayed here, despite what other people might think about that topic.
Yeah, I'm taking a different tack with this. I mean, you've done a podcast and won a Murrow Award for it, so this quality is really high. I think quality is at times overrated. I've been going for quantity, putting out a show every day, and you may win a Murrow Award, but if you do enough, they'll eventually just name an award after you. So that's my goal.
Well, you do a great job, and quantity allows for quantity. I mean, maybe it's the other way around. Yeah, quantity allows for quality, and you got
Well,
both going.
either that or it doesn't show up on the bottom line enough for anyone to notice what you're doing. So we'll go with either
Yep.
one of those. I'll go with what you said. John, what in the world are we going to do with Birmingham, or what is Birmingham going to do with Birmingham? This year has just been horrible for homicides.
Yeah, this year's been terrible, and we've been on a bad slide for the last several years. And I mean, I covered cops when I first started in this business 40 years ago, and and it was bad then during what they call the crack wars, and I've always been one that was, like we really have always been. I mean, back to 1911, we were terribly violent. We've always been violent.
Mhm.
And I've always been one that said, there's not a lot you can do about homicides because people get mad and they shoot each other. That's what happens. But something's going on here, and we've reached a point where, um, people who are the staunchest defenders of the city who live here and who, love the place or questioning whether it's safe to go outside. And when you get to that point where your supporters are beginning to doubt that you have any control over the situation, then I think we're in big trouble. And frankly, the mayor of Birmingham, made big news. Made his Instagram post making fun of a
Right.
legislator for saying they need to bring the National Guard in, and um, and I get that, I get that, but population is falling off the table, and homicide rates are through the roof, and four people just 20 some odd people got shot, and it is not the damn time for a social media mayor. It's time for something to be done in a city with a police department that's hundreds short of capacity, where that constantly has had homicide trouble, and it is increasing. At the same time, the population is falling, and I think that we have to have somebody who's dedicated to doing something about it. And I'm not one to blame politicians. I'm not one to blame politicians for this because, again, I don't know
Mhm.
what they do about it. I don't know how you solve it, but I know that you don't make light of it and make jokes about it in the shadow of death.
Yeah. Well, regardless what kind of politics are at play here, because I don't know what all
Right.
is in Representative Gavon's mind, but when she started talking about the staffing of the Birmingham Police Department, I mean, that seems like a no-brainer. This summer we had another quad, and like there were like 8 or 9 people died in Birmingham that night. And I spent the morning with a police officer, and I, tough guy comes in off his every night after finishing his shift, And I mean, you could just tell it's upsetting, even though he didn't see all 8 of them. Just to be a part of that is such a drain,
Right.
and just having more guys on, makes them more comfortable getting up and going to work every day if people care enough to fully stay. And I know it's tough. I'm not putting this on the mayor, but she does have a point there, regardless of the politics. It seems to me.
Well, right. We do have staffing problems, and we do have. I mean, and it's a tough job. I mean, it's a combat pay
Mhm.
kind of job, and
Yeah.
in any job, even in where we are, if there are more people there to cover news, it makes it easier for everybody. And if there's more people at the Walmart, it's easier to get the shifts done, and people get happier. And
Hmm.
it's a traumatic job. It's a tough job. It's a difficult job, and you see things that you can't unsee.
Hmm.
And so, I mean, they need as much support as they can get. And but we got to figure out what's going on, and I still can't imagine how in this day and age it's 3 or 4 days after this situation, and um, I know every building over there has a camera. I know every house on the way has a camera, and it's still stunning to imagine how somebody's not in custody.
I liked your column. Obviously there's blame to put wherever, guns, whatever you want to do, but basically, this is a horrible crime done by horrible people. Full stop.
Yeah, I mean that's. I mean, let's face it. You mentioned another mass shooting earlier here this year, and there was another one besides that, and you see them all over the country. And when your job is to write about stuff like this, you know, you, what can you say after a certain point? I mean, you sort of run out
Mhm.
of words. But the bottom line is, yeah. I mean, if you're looking for somebody to blame, I mean, it is the people who did the shooting. I mean,
Yeah.
and they're talking about a murder for hire and all this stuff. And if you're talking about actually just stepping out with a with a gun that's made automatic by a Glock switch or whatever, which is a whole nother conversation.
Yeah.
But and put that into a crowd of people you're shooting at and people you're not shooting at, and just unleash whatever you got in there. I mean, that's a terrible sorry, I almost cursed there. A terrible person, that's and it strikes me that that's just we're just seeing we don't I don't believe we are seeing more shootings than we did back in the day when I have to do some research to make sure of that.
Yeah.
But I don't believe we're seeing more shootings. But I think we're seeing a whole lot more bullets and a whole lot more indiscriminate shooting of people because of lack of concern for who else you get, and and I think that is really really disturbing. It says a lot about the people who are doing the shooting in that they don't care who else they get as long as they get who they're um,
Yeah.
sort of aiming at.
Yeah. I lived in Birmingham for 15 years. I live near there now. And the gunfire that you just hear definitely increased.
Is that what drove you to leave?
Number one reason, I've got a garden in the backyard now. We've got a little room. This is my speed of
Right.
life. But I want to be responsible and say that sure that's I also have to consider, where's my daughter going to go out at night? When she drives away from here, is she going in the direction of the gunfire I just heard?
Right. Yeah. I mean, it's a tough thing. Yeah. I mean, I live in Birmingham, and I love Birmingham, and as you know, we both have been big defenders of this town in a lot of ways. But when you start, um, when it gets close, you think about it, and that's what scares me most about this one. Not for me, but for so many people who are all of a sudden questioning whether they're living in the right place. And the town, the city itself, again, I find, in many ways, I find it to be an oasis, and it certainly pays the bills for a lot of the things we enjoy as a metro, without a lot of help from the state.
Mhm.
But it's already, to imagine that, it's down to 196,000 people in the city of Birmingham. That's crazy. When I started working, it was over 300, right?
Jeez.
And that's, I don't know how sustainable that is. I mean, what happens when Hoover passes it in population? We become it just, we have to nip this kind of stuff in the bud if we're going to survive, and if we're going to be economically viable, and
Mhm.
if people are going to want to live here.
A lot of that is nearby suburbs. And I know that's always been kind of vilified to a point, people moving to the suburbs and white flight and that sort of thing. But, you know, at least it's not people moving to Huntsville, right? I mean, um, in a
Yeah, good.
generation, we can make a difference.
Yeah. Um, that, I mean, yeah, I mean, that fragmentation, we have so much fragmentation. We got 36 municipalities in this county that everybody, which um, causes a lot of problems, including, just the failure to move forward is one. And, because when you can't, for Birmingham police officers who can't take it anymore, who might want more money or get along better with their bosses or whatever, there are always jobs in the suburbs they can go and probably make about the same amount of money and probably not
Mhm.
have as much stress and as much PTSD in doing it. So, I mean, all of those things make it more difficult for us um, to hold on to people in that regard. So, the days of dreaming of a unified government, I guess, are over. But I would
Mhm.
certainly like to see a little more friendship and cooperation and sort of civic pride in our metro area, um,
Yeah.
if not for our city.
Yeah, despite this whole conversation, Birmingham's a really cool place. It's still a really cool place. Most of the crime is done among drug dealers and that sort of thing. I've never felt unsafe walking around Birmingham.
And it usually happens late at night, and it's true. I mean, not to make light of anybody's death because they're all bad, but
Hmm.
but I feel the same way. But a lot of people feel a little bit different after that much gunfire
Yeah,
at 5 Points South.
oh yeah,
Not 100 yards from Shea Fonfon and what in Highlands, though it's now not open, but. Yeah, I mean that kind of hit home. But I agree. I think that we ought to have signs at our city limits that say "not as bad as you think," and because I think that most people who find themselves here for the first time are genuinely surprised at.
hmm
I mean, we got good food and we got good music and we got some pretty cool people.
yeah.
Um, we just got some that make it tough on everybody.
That's exactly right. Well, John, I also wanted to mention, since you're on the show, I haven't done this. I think you've been on twice over the years, but you and I, since we're talking about Birmingham, this occurred to me. You and I actually share a former neighborhood
Hmm.
in Roebuck Springs. You grew up there. You Banks High
I
School,
did.
am I right?
Banks High School, indeed. WJ Christian Elementary, Southeast Lake Elementary, and Banks High. Go Jets.
A wonderful place. I still uh, go play golf in Roebuck every chance that I get. And Coach Bowden did. Coach Bobby Bowden did for until he passed.
Yeah,
Actually,
I met him out there. I saw him out there once. So you're not the one that every time I drive by there, some golf ball bounces on the street in front of me. So I guess that might be. Is that you? I'm cursing out when that happens.
probably not every time, but it's highly likely if we timed it up right. Off of number five, yeah, I've been in the road a couple of times. I say it's because I'm a big hitter.
Yeah, I mean, I think that if we do the math properly, your chances of getting killed by a golf ball and on Roebuck Parkway are way better than you're getting shot somewhere in the city. But that's just a guess.
I feel it depends on who's teeing off, but yeah, at certain moments, I would take my chances on the streets instead of in line of one of my big cuts. I think I play golf with a couple of people from the neighborhood, the Real Brothers, right? Did
Oh
you
yeah,
went to school with them in Banks?
Kevin and Yeah,
Kevin and Randy.
Kevin and Randy. Yeah.
That is my wife's uncles.
All right. Well, tell them hello. Are they good
Yeah,
golfers?
they're better than me.
Uh,
One other person who shares this is I can't think of the actress's name. Miss Kitty lived in our neighborhood.
well, that's right. That's right.
What was her name?
Well, I told you before we got on here that if you ask me a proper noun, I won't be able to remember it because uh, I have somehow lost the ability to do that. Like uh, like the guy told me yesterday, if you ask me about a book or whatever, you know, say what's that book that the Christians read that starts with a B? That's where I'm at right now. I forgot To Kill a Mockingbird the other day. Yeah.
Amanda Blake, but I had to use the Google machine to find out. Yeah, Miss Kitty supposedly during her childhood lived in a couple places in Birmingham. One was in our former stomping grounds.
Great spot. Terrible place to learn to drive.
I